Many Nigerians now pay for goods online or make bank transfers via mobile apps. Technology has been seen as an enabler as far as innovation is concerned, and it's the new minimum standard in the fast-growing electronic payment space. Technology has also lowered the entry barrier to providing a service that accounts for about 30% of bank revenues as new players leverage technology to bring a basic banking service closer to customers. So joining me in the studio to discuss all things technology and the new digital revolution is Mr. Ifeanyi who is the Business Director for Technology, Media and Telecommunications at Verraki. You're welcome, sir. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the Global Business Report. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, what do we mean and is Nigeria ready?
I think there are a number of meanings that one could derive from the fourth industrial revolution, but the one that I would like to typically focus on is the one that deals with disruption, essentially. Okay. So for me, all the different revolutions over the years, from the first to the third to the fourth, have all been about disruption and global competitiveness, right? So for the fourth industrial revolution, we are dealing with things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics. What would this mean for Nigeria? I mean, this would mean an impact for the future of jobs, for instance. If I take an example for the third industrial revolution leading up to the fourth, India, for instance, positioned during the third industrial revolution because there was going to be a connectedness leading to a lot of outsourcing. So India sort of positioned for the outsourcing industry and set up a lot of sort of remote call centers, and they were able to, build a lot of jobs just based on that. Right now, leading to the fourth one, what would likely happen to that Indian outsourcing model for customer centers, for instance? Artificial intelligence, machine learning could mean that there will be a lot of jobs taken from individuals and moved into machines as machines become more intelligent, right? So there's an impact for jobs and essentially economy, right? What does this mean for Nigeria, you asked? And is Nigeria ready? I would say that Nigeria has a lot of work to do in terms of getting ready. Okay. Let's leave it at that for now.
Well, polite answer. Keep it short and sweet. Okay, now, if we're going to talk about leading up to the fourth industrial revolution, there's a line that takes us there, and that's internet. Yeah? Yes. Specifically broadband internet. Yes. How come it's not as available nationwide as it should be?
I think you're referring to broadband, and this is a topic that I think is very close to my heart. Broadband connectivity, I would say, is a product, and like every other product, availability is always a factor of cost of production, right? So broadband in Nigeria hasn't gotten to where it should have been by now. And the real reason for that is the cost of production is still high. And then if you just look at that cost pillar and all the elements that are fitting into the cost pillar, for instance, you look at, 3 dimensions, right? So you look at civil works, right, which you typically see take about 60 to 70% of the cost of production of broadband connectivity. And then you look at the passive infrastructure layer provided by a lot of OEMs around the world. That would probably take about 6 to 10% of the cost. And then you look at, of course, the active layer, dealing with about another, say, 20%. So if you look at the bulk of that cost, the civil works, the major chunk of that has to do with permitting and right-of-way and multiple taxation. And so this is where the right-of-way issue that has just sort of been a problem for penetration across Nigeria, across different states, has been the main issue why penetration is still low and why availability and, of course, affordability is still very low.
Okay, now, so the infrastructure is what it is, right?
Yes.
How then can entrepreneurs leverage existing technology, right, infrastructure, to leapfrog existing channels and get ahead of the competition? Like, how are they able to? How do you think they can navigate that space?
I think there are different ways to look at this, but the way that I would choose to look at it is for entrepreneurs to even leverage technology. I think you need to look at the entire ecosystem, right? If you look at the private sector and the public sector, there's something that is called corporate innovation, right? So this is where, so entrepreneurs essentially need access to markets. So the first one is access to market. The second one is the requisite skill sets. I think there's a lot being done by the technology ecosystem in general in terms of trying to improve the skill sets. And if you look at the access to markets, the access to market is still somewhat of a bit problematic for most entrepreneurs. And there are ways, reasonable ways to address, issues like that. One of them would be to drive corporate innovation. And what this simply means is that the government and the private sector need to sort of open up to sort of the technology and software development partners locally. This will definitely engender deeper engagement with the tech ecosystem, lead to more innovative solutions coming out of the tech ecosystem. And so, of course, once there are a few quick wins and early successes, then we can begin to talk about how these solutions begin to scale going forward, right?
Okay. I'm afraid to ask this, but how can our players, local players here, aspire to one day compete with the likes of the Facebooks and the Googles, massive billion-dollar companies? But yeah, how?
I think the short answer to the how is to look at the future, right? Look at the future. Where's technology going 10 years from now, 5 years from now, right? So you could look at the short term where the local players could try and dominate the local markets. But that's not a global play, necessarily. So you could have, local players beginning to build solutions that are already available globally, but try and dominate the local scene for those solutions and those products.
Okay.
I mean, that's, I think, in the short term. But in the long term, how do they compete going forward? You have to look at the future and look at where technology is going. Whatever you're playing in now and dominating in the short term, in the next 3 years or 5 years, is probably getting obsolete.
Right.
And the new wave of, or area of technology competition is already evolving. So how do we position for that? You have to look at the future.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so an issue that tech players or other companies have been facing recently have been matters of underpaying tax, privacy issues, and unfair competition. If you look at our space here, how would you say regulators, have they been vigilant in trying to address these particular issues in the tech space?
Rotus, that's an interesting question. I would say that you can't really be vigilant if you're not involved. Most players in the tech ecosystem have been advocating for more participating from the public sector, from the regulators. That advocacy has been for different reasons. It could just be for creating enabling environments. It could be for some kind of funding. So the short answer really is that the regulator needs to be getting more involved in building the ecosystem. It's not something that one sector could build unilaterally. It needs to be, all hands need to be on deck, essentially. So both private and public sector participation need to be in place before we can talk about more regulation and more vigilance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking specifically to the public sector,
yes.
What are the fastest things that government can do in order to support faster growth for the sector, or rather the most important things that government can do to support faster growth for this sector?
I think the top of my list, and maybe I would have about two, but the top of my list would be enabling local content.
Okay.
Right? So what are the government opportunities, take it from there, for technology? What are the government requires for technology? How involved are solutions to those problems being sourced from the local tech ecosystem? Is there any kind of framework that sort of engenders that? Is there a policy that is guiding this? In other countries where you have seen growth and development of the ecosystems or the local players, there have been policies, deliberate policies that have been put in place to support and engender the growth of a technology ecosystem. So I would say the first one would be local content. Maybe another one would, look at the skill sets, right? So is there a special funding? I think the CBN has been working with a number of committee members to try and come up with a special funding targeted specifically at improving skills. Right. So a skill development funding for special technology courses around AI or even basic coding courses. I think those two
are the main
things, yes.
Okay. Another thing I want to ask, the observation from some about the tech space in the country is that it's dominated by payments, facilitators in the payment space. And some are saying it's a lot, they're saying it's saturated, it's too many. Wanted to get your thoughts on that with respect to Nigeria's financial inclusion goals. Does that naturally just create an opportunity for this proliferation of payment-specific players in the tech space in Nigeria?
I think that space, the fintech space, essentially is what you're referring to.
Yes, yes.
I think that space is fairly young for us to even be talking about too many players.
Okay.
I think as that space begins to mature over the years, probably market forces will drive, the reduction in number of players. But I would say that, the more the merrier for now, until sometime in the future where the market has reached, or that sector has reached some level of maturity in terms of the skill set available, but also in terms of the product offerings. Maybe we'll see a number of mergers and acquisitions amongst the different players in that space, and then we'll get down to a reasonable number.
Fantastic stuff. Business Director for Technology, Media and Telecommunications at Verraki, Mr. Ifeanyi Akosinu, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here, Rotus.